Good morning, everybody. I want to first thank AXYS for putting this conference together. This is just magnificent to see you all out here and to see the attendance here this year. Just really wonderful. And for inviting me and my terrific research coordinator, Vanessa Alschuler, to this conference. I also want to thank Robbie for finally getting my degrees correct. I am an MD. Sometimes Robbie gives me a PhD, which I've thanked him for in public. An honorary MDPA, and then sometimes I'm just a PhD. And then I noticed online I had no degree. So this could be an evolutionary developmental thing, you know. Eventually you just lose your degree. But I do have an MD for this, so thank you for getting that right. It's been an honor to work in this field for over 25 years, and I've seen the development of the science, I've seen the development of the clinical practice, and it's just really wonderful to see. I'm going to give you just a short talk on what I think is a roadmap for advancing knowledge in clinical practice of brain and behavioral effects of X and Y chromosome variation. I am a psychiatrist by training, but I've also had genetics and neuroscience background. Okay, now Robbie, I have to remember what you said about advancing. That's not it.
That top white.
Oh yes, good. Okay, so here's my overview of how can we improve intervention for brain and behavioral effects of X and Y variation. So by the way, why am I talking about brain and behavioral effects of X and Y variation? Because I am also a clinician and I do see patients, and I have to tell you, although there's some bias because I am a child and adolescent psychiatrist, but when the parents come in to see me, it's almost always in reference to many of the topics that our previous speakers have already spoken about. Behavior, cognition, learning, impulsivity, and so forth, and these are the worries that parents have. So what do we need to do? First of all, we need to understand brain and behavioral effects much, much better. In particular, what I call state and trait, others call state and trait, and I'll tell you about this more in just a second. We need to remember that DSM diagnoses are not real conditions, and they will not help specify XY brain and behavioral issues. I like to think about DSM diagnoses as kind of a cloud in the sky. You can see it, you can describe it. Sometimes it looks really nice, but if you try and stand on it, you're going to fall right through. So these diagnoses can be very useful in obtaining services, and I don't hold back in using them in my clinical practice. But from the research perspective, I don't think they're helpful. We need to conduct developmental or longitudinal studies to better understand cause and effect and critical windows of development. So we are actually, we are very happy that we were able to get funding from the National Institutes of Health to do such a study right now with my partner Judy Ross in Philadelphia and Nemours. And Vanessa and I will tell you about that study at I think it's a 1 p.m. Seminar today. We need to conduct studies where multidimensional data are collected. So I listed some of these sources of the data: information, brain, behavior, genetic, molecular, hormonal, environment, etc. And then we also need to assess for potential subgroups for each condition. And believe it or not, when you collect this type of multidimensional data, it gives you a handle on finding potential subgroups that might even respond to treatment differently. We need to analyze the data from these studies in ways that take maximal advantage of their multidimensional and developmental nature. And this is, you've probably heard of it, big data analytics, and I will talk more about this at our 1 p.m. seminar. If we can do all the above, we will then be able to design new, more specific and effective interventions based on this new knowledge. I'm absolutely convinced of this. But we'll need a lot of advocacy, an awful lot of advocacy. We'll need some heavy lifting. Our previous speaker spoke about the uptick in autism diagnoses and research, and the funding for autism went up in an amazing way, but it was particularly because of advocacy from families, from people in the media, and so forth. So we need a lot of that. We need a lot of collaboration. So even though our study, we're getting over $2 million from the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development to do this 5-year developmental longitudinal study, the type of studies that I'm talking about would be would really be revealing in this field will be multiple institutes across the country and perhaps even internationally. And that type of collaboration is both necessary and essential. Oh, the money thing didn't come up. There's dollar signs. We need a lot of money. A lot of money. All right. So I told you, what are DSM diagnoses? What are they really? What do the scientific data say? Now, I used to show something like this at talks in my field, in a field of origin in psychiatry about 25 years ago, and people would get very upset with me. And now they don't get upset with me anymore. It's really amazing. So what do the data really tell us? This is what the data tell us. We have multiple now identified risk factors. We were talking about autism before. By the way, Leo Connor, who was the topic of our first speaker this morning, happened to be a professor, my father's favorite professor at Johns Hopkins when he went to medical school. He was a good guy, that's what he said. Multiple risk factors that traverse multiple neurodevelopmental pathways that lead to the same diagnosis. We know this. This is not fiction. We know this for autism. We know this for ADHD. And so what does that mean? We're probably stuck, if we stay at the level of DSM diagnoses, just treating behaviors or cognition, and I don't want to do that anymore. That's one way to start, but it's not the way to actually make big differences. Okay, I mentioned state and trait, so let's go over this very briefly. Our previous speaker did mention this in a different way. State refers to if my slide advances. On the computer. Yeah. No. State refers to a temporary state of being. So thinking, feeling, learning, behaving, or relating. In this case, for state, so how you are feeling or learning or doing at a particular time, environmental influences play a prominent role, but they also interact with a biological predisposition. Okay, so that's state. Yeah, we're not. Hang on. There we go. What about trait? Trait is a more stable and enduring characteristic or pattern of behavior. And I like to think about this as being determined by genetic or hormonal influences interacting with long-term environmental influences that shape the behavior. And we probably, at this point in time, do not have the necessary scientific information or knowledge to clearly differentiate these two constructs in XY variation. Okay, how many of you have heard the term precision medicine? How many of you have heard the term personalized medicine? Okay, so here's the key. Personalized medicine became precision medicine. So they're synonyms, they're the same thing. How do we build a precision medicine approach to X and Y variation? So precision medicine or personalized medicine is supposed to provide more specific, more effective approaches, treatments for particular disorders of interest. Well, so this is my conceptualization of where we are yesterday and today and where we can go tomorrow. So most of our treatments still in clinical practice with X and Y variation are symptom-based. So if we have ADHD-type symptoms, we think about behavioral, cognitive, or medication approaches. That's symptom-based, and it's what some might call intuition medicine. It can be helpful, but it's not specific. There are some studies now starting. Nicole talked about this in her talk of evidence-based treatments to see if, in fact, there can be greater specificity. Those are cohort-based and hypothesis-based, oftentimes controlled studies. But what do we really want to do? Tomorrow we want to have an algorithm-based approach to treatments in X and Y variation. And that's what we call precision medicine. What do we need to get there? We need a lot. We need to develop much more information about brain development and function, genetic and molecular profiles, physiological profiles, treatment response, family environment, cognition and behavior, all of the above. I believe when we analyze those data with a big data approach, and this is not just saying big data and for you to be impressed, there are some really, really interesting, innovative big data approaches that can weave this type of multidimensional information together to produce much more exact profiles of effects and subgroups. Oops. And that's how we get to precision medicine for X and Y variation. Our study is a first approach. For doing that, it's called Brains, Genes, and Puberty. And we are doing this in 2 locations, both on the East Coast in Philadelphia and in Delaware, and on the West Coast at Stanford. And like other studies described today, families who participate can come out and visit us at no cost to them and participate in this type of multidimensional study where we hope to really bring about very specific information. The other fun part about this study is we get to see our families for up to 4 time points. So this longitudinal developmental approach we are trying to practice in this study. Here's information about the website. If Vanessa's in the audience, can you stand up? Where are you, Vanessa? There she is. She has more specific information. Pamphlets, you know, if you're on the East Coast, we're going to refer you to Philadelphia, Delaware. If you're on the West Coast, to us. If you're in the middle, we'll toss a coin or ask you where you'd like to go. In the winter, you're probably going to want to come see us. Although it still rains in California. You can check your eligibility with this site. We will have brochures at a table out in the back, but just come find me or find Vanessa. Or are the research coordinators assistants with Judy Ross's group here as well? Can you stand up? Can you go ahead and stand up? Great, so find them as well. And so we work together on this. And thank you very much.